Tom Clark's 6M podcast is a Boink Studios production. And now, on with the show. Hey, what is up? Welcome to Tom Clark's 6M podcast. I'm your host, Tom Clark, and in this episode, I'm joined by co-host Phil Lindsey.
Streamers are where it's at, kids. How many of you binge streamers? How many of you watch stuff on streamers? How many of you subscribe to way too many streamers? Show of hands. Yeah, me too. Oh my God. One day I went to count them all and I got so depressed I took a nap. I needed like a mood changing bracelet to make me feel better. Maybe that would have been the answer. That's a joke off mic. In terms of streamers, yeah, there's a bunch of them. And depending on how much time you have in your life to watch some of these shows, you may not have time, and maybe you got tons, I don't know. But for a lot of us, you got to be kind of selective about what you watch. Not that you want to be a snob about it, but look, I don't have a heck of a lot of time to spend on entertainment apart from, work and family and other responsibilities, right? So what I choose to watch, again, I have to sort of be selective. I'm a Marvel guy. Phil's a Marvel guy. I assume a lot of you good people listening are Marvel people, yes? So maybe you gave Secret Invasion a spin. Maybe you're sorry you did. Or maybe you don't care what any of the critics say. This is your favorite Marvel streaming property of all time. And buddy, you can't wait to see seasons 2 through 8. Maybe you're just here for it and you love you some Sam Jackson and everything about this show works for you. I can't wait to get into it because I have no idea what Phil's opinion is. We've barely spoken about it, which makes this all the more fun for me as the host and as Phil's friend to get into. Let's get into it. Secret Invasion is an American television miniseries created by Kyle Bradstreet for the streamer, everybody fall asleep on that one, Disney Plus, based on the 2008 Marvel Comics storyline of the same name. It is the 9th. Did we know this? It is the 9th television series in the MCU produced by Marvel Studios. That alone makes me want to take a nap. It shares continuity with the films of the franchise. It follows Nick Fury and Talos as they uncover a conspiracy by a group of shape-shifting Skrulls, say that fast 3 times, to conquer the Earth. It's created by Kyle Bradstreet, as we also said, based on Marvel Comics, directed by Ali Salim, starring Sam Jackson and a host of other actors and actresses. The running time is around 35 to 55 minutes, depending on what episode it is. The budget for this series, grab something and hold on, kids, is $212 million. Wow. We recently reviewed The Flash. That sucker had a budget of $200 million, baby. Look, I'm not drawing comparisons. I'm not setting you up for disappointment. Again, it's whatever you want. It's fine. Original release June 21st through June 21st through July 26th. And there, in a whole bunch of words, is your lowdown for Secret Invasion. Phil, I cannot wait to get your take here. You always play it straight. You never mince words. Tell me as we kick this thing off. Did this work for you as a fan? Were you into it? What's your overall opinion of this series as a whole?
This very much felt like the bit from Family Guy where Brian is doing the song and they're doing a whole parody to Back to the Future, and the crowd's into it, and then he gets into it and he goes over the top and he's like trying to overplay and all this stuff like Back to the Future, and then somebody in the crowd's like, "Hey, I didn't like any of that." This feels very much like that. This feels very much like they had 5 episodes of really good and compelling television, and then they got to the last episode and didn't stick the landing, and then everybody was like, "Wait a minute, that whole show was bad." It's not that the whole show was bad. It's just that, they didn't quite stick the landing. The finale was a bit disappointing. And I even think the finale was terrible. There were things about it that just did not work. But as a show as a whole, I thought it was very interesting. I thought it was some of the best stuff that they've managed to do with the espionage stuff. Um, I thought Sam Jackson gave an incredible performance throughout. Um, this is the first time I would say in the MCU, because for the longest, following the Ultimates, it just felt like a foregone conclusion for a lot of people. Hey, if you make an Avengers movie, cast Sam Jackson because Brian Hitch and Mike and why am I saying Mike? Sorry, Mark.
Yeah, Mark
um,
Miller. Yeah.
I was about to say Mike for some reason. Mark made him Fury in those comics, and so that popularized it. And of course, when he showed up in Iron Man, it was off to the races. This was the first time that I felt like Nick Fury felt like a fully fledged character that wasn't just a black man as Nick Fury. It felt like this is Nick Fury, a black man, if that makes sense. Because for 5 episodes, his race and who he was, his backstory, his family was a big part of his character, and we didn't get a chance to see that in any of the MCU films.
Excellent call, because you know why they're only able to sit on a character's shoulder for so long, so they can get back to the other 10 or so characters. And I'm not criticizing, but they've got a lot of characters to tell their stories, and he was always there. But you're right, they never had a chance to really dive in at all until this show.
Yeah, I feel like and I feel like that was a big part of Falcon and the Winter Soldier as well. Like race and how they talked about race in that show was just so prominent. Um, and they covered race and Sam in such a nuanced way. I feel like they did the same thing with Nick here. And I think that's sadly one of the things that's going to go underappreciated about this show because there's so many bad reviews.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them. Rotten Tomatoes at this point today, as we do this, the aggregator is around 56% approval rating. That's only based on 184 reviews. I say only. To me, give me 500 or better, but I don't know if we're going to get to that point. But not a good number by any means. Um, Praise for Sam Jackson as there should be. I don't think that he is an issue here at all. I don't know that the cast is an issue here. I think, and I'm seeing a lot of reviews, some reviews that blame superhero fatigue. I'm getting real sick of reading that. I heard this 10 years ago, Phil, if I'm being honest. I don't know how much credence I give to that. Do you give any credence to the whole superhero fatigue idea with this?
I don't give any credence to the superhero fatigue idea. I do give credence to the idea that your audience doesn't want something that feels contrived. And I feel like the show was one thing for 5 episodes, and then they were like, "Hey, we got to have one of those big um, end boss final fight scenes, don't we? We gotta have one of these big fight scenes." But I feel like you didn't really need that in a show that was set up as like this espionage psychological thriller. And to get to the last leg of this thing and decide it kind of needs to turn into the popcorn superhero stuff you've already been doing, I feel like it kind of did a disservice to the rest of the show.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I expected this show to be somewhere between Falcon and Winter Soldier and Captain America: The Winter Soldier. That's kind of where I expected all this to play out, and it feels like that's what it should have been. But I'm with you. It's almost like I don't know what happened. I didn't hate the show as it was going. I was well aware of the reviews as I was watching the series. The reviews were coming out by episode one, for goodness sake, of people complaining and whatnot. I'm like, it's one episode. What are we talking about? And then, by episode 2 or 3, I'm still reading reviews that are negative. I'm like, I'm just going to sit back and enjoy this for what it is. I'm not going to sweat what's being said. I just want to see what they do in the end. And then the end comes, and I'm like, I didn't hate the last episode. I don't know. Here's something I'll throw to you. When they pulled the swerve, so to speak, with Hawkeye and gave him a family, gave him a wife and kids, and gave him a backstory, I think it was a good move because of the entire team. He was the weakest, obviously.
Mhm.
He's human. Yes, he's had training and whatnot. Yes, he's deadly with the arrow. Of course he is. But he and Widow are the two. If there are weak links on the Avengers team, if there are, it's he and Widow, if only because they don't have abilities, right? So like I'm okay with them giving him a backstory. Did we need this much backstory with Fury, or do you think it was just enough, or do you think it was well done either way?
I think if you're gonna center the show around Nick, you had to find something that um would, because I mean we've already seen him in a vulnerable spot, but you
Mm,
also needed something that kind of grounded him solely in this conflict with the scrolls. And I think giving him a romantic relationship with a scroll was a perfect way to do that. Um, Boy, there is a lot of room for error here. This could have went really bad, but I feel like their relationship was one of the highlights of this show.
mm.
Um, are there bits of it that are a little bit over the top and soap opera esque? Yes, but I thought for the most part it was really really good. Um, and I even thought their moment in the final episode was a great way to end the show.
Mm.
But it's just that there were so many other things going on in this episode, like this silly Mexican standoff they did with the president literally getting rolled around in his hospital bed. just
Yeah.
just fucking stupid. It doesn't make any sense. Um, you've got this overly done Super Scroll fight that really didn't need to be here. It was just a lot going on in the last episode that I feel like I would have been more happy if they spent more time on uh, a lot of stuff that I was interested in, like Nick's relationship with his wife, or um, like stuff with Gaia and Telos. And I feel like even with the main bad guy of the show, his demise was a bit anticlimactic for everything that they set him up to be. Because I felt like he was a really good villain. I felt like he had a really good motivation. I feel like he was very justified in some of his beliefs. And then they got to the end and they were like, "Oh, he's just a power hungry guy that just doesn't care about his people at all." And I was like, "Oh, okay, cool."
Yeah, at some point, revenge became more important. He lost sight of the bigger picture. Like he's one of those villains, and he's an atypical villain, and that's not necessarily a negative comment, Phil. There's a reason why villains are villains, and we can see it, but they can't. And I think that
Hmm.
he fits that role perfectly. He didn't see himself as a villain; he saw himself as a savior. But like he's killing his own people, and I'm like, okay, but and of course we can see that, and even his people see that. He cannot see that because he's so driven by rage and by revenge and by hatred it's made him blind to his own cause, essentially.
Yeah, and I think they did very interesting things with him and Gaia, but I thought the way that they finished their conflict just didn't really work for me. Just ending it in this big superhero beat up.
Mm.
I didn't really need that. I mean, there are things like Gaia recruiting the kid in the very first episode, and of course Gravik kills him, and we never get to see her react to that because she brought him in. And we do see Nick walk past, Nick in disguise, Gaia in disguise as Nick, walking past his body, but we don't get like the moment that we should have gotten out of that. I felt like there was an important moment there that we didn't really get a chance to see. I mean, we get an entire Nick um, diatribe or monologue, and it's not even Nick; it's Gaia in disguise.
Yeah, no kidding. Like that was really well. Did you realize it wasn't him at that time?
I did when I realized something was off when he told him that he was going to give him, which this was another thing that didn't work before I go off. And why'd you give him the harvest? Like you could have,
Mm.
that was, that was a dumb plot point to just give him the harvest. But before Nick gives him the harvest, he tells him, here, I'm going to give you this as just apology, but just leave the planet, go find another planet to take over and destroy. Just leave here. That doesn't feel like something Nick would say.
Yeah, really. Yeah. Yeah, no kidding.
And that's when I realized it probably wasn't him. And I also realized at some point he had stopped keeping up the ruse of coughing and trying to pretend
Mm.
that the radiation was affecting him.
Good
and that's when
call.
I was like, oh, it's probably not him. But I also waited to watch the episode until way after it aired, and so something about it, the timing of it, I wasn't spoiled on it, but I did something about the timing of it. I was like, oh yeah, this doesn't look right to me. That's probably not Nick.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, it's not over here. I mean, this is going to lead supposedly directly into Armor Wars. It's also going to lead into the Marvels, which we've got coming later. I got thoughts on that. Not a lot of negative thoughts, just thoughts. Um, I'm interested to see what happens with that. So before we really get into this, I can't say that Marvel has ever really knee jerked on anything. I say that, but they've pushed back the release of various properties at this point. They've pushed back the timeline. A lot of it has to do with the writer and actor strike. I get it. But they've received a lot of criticism, really beginning with She-Hulk. I think that's where it really started. Was a lot of fans saying, "Okay, this is what am I watching?" But do you think that they do anything crazy here? I mean, do you think Armor Wars is going to be in any kind of trouble, or what do you think is going to happen here?
I don't know. I would like to see something with Don Cheadle as a lead character because I feel like he kind of deserves a chance to lead something, even if it's
Same.
just a TV show. Because they've moved it. It was initially going to be a TV show, then they announced it was going to be a movie. I'm pretty sure it's probably not going to be a movie. It's probably going to end up back on Disney Plus, if I had to guess. Um, but just given his performance in this show, which is another highlight that I think people are gonna gloss over, he was fantastic here.
Hmm.
Um, Not just as Rhodey, but also as the Scroll character in disguise, and just as kind of like the secondary bad guy of this show. He was great. Um,
Mm.
that scene with him and Nick in the bar, one of the best scenes, not just in this show, but some of the best acting I've seen in any Marvel property.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
So I would really like to see him get a chance to lead a property like Armor Wars as the main character. Um, I don't think it has to hurt it. I think there's enough questions from this show of when was Rhodey replaced.
Mm.
There's enough intrigue around Iron Man and what they're gonna do with Iron Man's legacy to keep this going. Um, I mean, as long as it's good, I'm not really worried. But I also think that there's just this kind of overreaction happening right now where people are like, man, ever since Endgame, Marvel's kind of lost their way,
I disagree.
and it's just like, well, yeah, there were things that are very much heavily criticized, like you said. People movies that people don't like, whether it be Quantum Mania or Love and Thunder or whatever else. People haven't been happy about the endings of some of these shows. But to act like there hasn't been some very big highs since then is just insane. Like we got No Way Home since then. We got Wakanda Forever since then. To just ignore those two things that were both hits. I mean, WandaVision was a massive hit for them.
It was absolutely Loki's excellent, man.
Yes, Loki was also excellent. I'm a big fan of Moon Knight as well. I don't
Mm.
think any of the Disney Plus shows have been bad. You could argue that the shortened the shortened schedule doesn't really work. Like I feel like this is a show that needed more than 6 episodes, for example. And I feel like a few of the other shows could have been better if there were 13 episodes.
Mm.
Um, and so, try to go with that format hasn't really worked. But I wouldn't say that they're bad shows. I feel like there's some limitations. Um, but no, I mean some of the success that they've had since Endgame. No, now given you're not gonna reach the heights of something that you spent the better part of a decade building towards an end game. It's a finale to your longest overarching storyline. So no, nothing's gonna be that successful or be that well received since then. No, but to act like they haven't had huge success since then is just not true.
Oh yeah, yeah. People have short term memory for this stuff, and look, you know this. Like I know any fanboy or fangirl out there knows the fact here is that when you have a successful property, just like when you have a successful band, successful actor, successful whatever, I mean,
Hmm.
a lot of people are just waiting on that thing to fail. They're just waiting on it to have a misstep. And it's like, look at that. People just feed off negativity, man. Like I remember, was it Ringo? I think it was Ringo that said this about the Beatles. It might have been George, but I think it was Ringo if I remember correctly. That when they had made Magical Mystery Tour, that it got some pretty heavy criticism. And he said, well, for all the people that hate us, that was their chance to really come out and say, we told you. I'm paraphrasing, but it's you know what I mean? Like Marvel's been the king. I'm sorry. I enjoy other franchises. I enjoy what other studios do. Marvel's been the effing king for years, Phil. And the second they release a weak movie or a weak stream or whatever, and then something's back to back, they're failing. It's crashing. It's over. It's over. The genre is over. I'm like, okay, really? Then how come every other studio on the planet is still trying to make a hit comic book film and they can't come close?
Yeah. Why is everybody now trying to do shared universes still to this day?
Yep.
Um, this is the comic book boom is not going anywhere. I know people keep trying to predict the end of it. It's not going anywhere. Um, and yeah, I do think Marvel has had some missteps creatively. Um, but I also think that people have gotten to the point where they take these things a bit too seriously as well.
Hmm.
Um, like She-Hulk is prime example of that. I thought She-Hulk was excellent. And for people that are like, "Oh, this was their first big miss," no, there are some people that really enjoyed She-Hulk. Just because you wanted it to be this very serious uh show where I guess she like punched things and it was always serious instead of them doing like this like tongue in cheek Ally McBeal style lawyer show where the main character broke the fourth wall like she does in her comic. I don't really know what you were looking for. This is a show about a woman that turns into a big green giant, but is also a lawyer. Like, how can you take this serious? I don't know.
Right, right.
I don't know. I do think that's part of it. I think people are just so very much like their expectations are way up here. And that wasn't the thing when Marvel first started. They started with all of their C and D list characters, and with the idea of trying to make this into a thing. There were no high expectations for Iron Man. Um, it just worked out. I don't know if people remember then. There were no high expectations for this. They were picking Robert Downey Jr. at a time when it was a risk to go with him as Iron Man.
Hmm.
I don't know if people remember that, but no, this was I think that they've now gotten to the point where it feels like everything has to be a hit or bust.
Yeah.
And if something is not like a complete smash hit, then why are we doing this? It's awful. And I just think it's ridiculous, some of it. And I get if it's just you don't like it, you don't like it. But this whole man, Marvel fell off, man. It's over. I mean, there's still so many things that they're doing that people are enjoying. Again, we just got No Way Home a few years ago. We just got Wakanda Forever. Um, people are just now excited for Deadpool 3. That's a Marvel movie.
Hmm. Good call. Good call. Yeah, people like you said, people are blowing this stuff way out of proportion. I don't understand. I look. I have attempted to, and this is nothing I just started, kids, but I've been amending my way of thinking about these films and about these streamers as individual comic books. Like if you look at a streamer as being a 6 issue series, limited series of Secret
Mhm.
Invasion or whatever, you're going to have issues that work and some issues that maybe don't work quite as well. It's a different artist who subbed for an issue and it's like, the art's not great. Maybe the writing, you don't know where it's going. Maybe it's not what you expected. I mean, some comic books perform better than other comic books. That's kind of how I'm looking at this at the entirety of the MCU now, Phil. I'm no longer looking at it as, what do you mean that new Thor movie didn't do as great as before? It happens. It doesn't mean I'm happy about it, but look, process of elimination, Phil. If you make 20 films, there's a good chance 2 of them may not be great. I mean,
Yeah,
I mean, you keep rolling the dice, you're going to eventually come up snake eyes at some point.
absolutely. And just with the schedule and how many movies they pop out now, how many shows they pop out, No, you're gonna come out with stuff that people do not like.
Mm.
You're gonna come out with something that feels rushed, that feels like, hey, let's get it out there, um, just to have something on the calendar. It's gonna happen because that's what corporate does. Corporate doesn't care about quality at some points. They're just like, hey, this needs to be out at this time. We need to make this amount of money on it. Get it out. And because of that, sometimes movies are going to disappoint. Sometimes these products are going to disappoint. I
Mm.
think that that's part of the format of the show, and the issue of it, and why it doesn't work is because studio limitations. I was gonna be the guy coming into this show looking for it to be Secret Invasion, the miniseries that I read as a comic book fan. Um, there's just budgetary limitations in place where this isn't going to be this long, sprawling event that like includes Fantastic Four and all the entirety of the Marvel universe and has this big mystery across the entire universe where any hero can be a scroll. Yeah, of course that was better in every way, but unless you're gonna make Secret Invasion into a movie and have it like this tie-in from movie to movie like you did with the Thanos stuff, it's not gonna be that.
I saw those. I've read plenty of fan opinions saying the same thing. And at some point, I just have to tap out and say, all of you people have lost your collective minds. This would have been a $400 million budget for a show that, are you kidding me right now? Like,
Yeah,
no.
you could make that kind of thing into a show. It would need to be more than 6 episodes for first
Yeah.
off. I mean, if I had my way, I think the thing they should have done is we should have gotten to the end of a movie and somebody died and then they just turned into a scroll. And that would have been a teaser every movie of, every movie there's a bit of what if about who is a scroll, who can we trust. This paranoia is like running against this underlying storyline in every movie. That would have been cool. But they didn't go in that direction. What can I then say? Oh, it's a failure because they didn't do that? Yeah, I would have liked to see something like that, but they're going in a different direction. I don't have any control over these things.
Was Tony a scroll?
Um, I do think it would have been cool if they did something like that at the end of Endgame, where somebody in the Battle for Earth died, and they got turned over and they turned into a scroll. I think that would
Mm.
have been really cool. Because I mean, I think that was the excitement at the time when you're a comic reader. You kind of had to be there, where it was just really this like like this big random thing at the time. Um, I believe it was in New Avengers where Elektra dies at the end and she turns into a scroll and everybody's just like, wait a minute, what the heck? How
Yeah.
long has she
Yeah.
been a scroll? And
Yeah.
like you had this thing going on and on for close to a year of like all of these background stories and all of this stuff leading up to Secret Invasion. And then you finally got Secret Invasion, the miniseries. And I just don't think you would have ever topped that because this is something that, Bendis took the time to plant the seed for this over time. This was this long build for this. And unless you were going to take the time to do that, you just you were going to top that. You were going to match that same energy.
Well, speaking of characters being scrolls, let's jump into this cast because, man, I got to talk about this one dude that we've kind of mentioned. We know Sam Jackson is Nick Fury. I do think it was cool. We finally got the patch back and the black trench coat back. That was sweet. Finally got him in his gear. I love how Nick is so laid back, even in the most dire of consequences. He's still one of the most chill characters on screen. Like you, I don't know that I ever believed he was ever in real trouble in this show at all, and I don't know that I've ever believed it of any of the films he's been in yet. Which in any other instance, Phil, that would maybe ruin the show for me because I would say this character's not in jeopardy. They're not going to kill. They're not. He's not going to bleed out. He's whatever. Obviously, he's not. But like, I just didn't even believe there was a possibility of him getting shot in the leg at any given time. It just seemed like he's so. It's his performance, number one, but number two, the way the character's written. That this guy is always the smartest guy in the room. I mean, he is he's Jason Bourne, Phil. Like he's already thought 10 moves ahead. He already knows the lay of the land when he enters the room. He's got everything figured out in every one. Like, I love that. That never got old to me. I think amongst all the chaos of the scrolls and who is and who isn't, like you said, you need a steady hand. I mean, Nick Fury is the steady hand through this whole show, isn't he?
Yeah. Um, I think having Sam Jackson as a lead character worked really well.
Hmm.
I think a lot of the beats that they did with him were really good. Like, yeah, he is calm and collected. Nick Fury, he does like have this like confidence and smoothness to him, but he also showed a lot of vulnerability here. We did see him make more mistakes than we've seen him make throughout the entirety of the MCU. And we saw him react to his mistakes. I think it wasn't like, oh, he just made a mistake and quickly recovered from him. Like, I mean, when he had that big argument with Rhodey, we saw him immediately go outside and just kind of go like, "Dang, what am I gonna do?" And he's like head in hand stuff. Even the stuff with him and his wife, we saw him being like, "This is the first. This was like the first and biggest mistake I've made of my entire career." But he's also just like still very vulnerable in those moments with her. I think again that's what part of what made the show so interesting to me. Um, and just like his performance, because it wasn't just like him being this, untouchable spy. His moments where he was actually talking to people and his interpersonal relationships with people, his relationships with Maria, his relationship with Brody, you can very much tell that those interviews where Sam Jackson admitted that he felt the way that he wasn't included in any of the Black Panther movies, and you could tell like him and Don Cheadle felt like they should have done something in those movies. You could feel till they came to this like, hey, this is what we want to do with two black characters on screen together. We want to get a chance to play off black characters over there as well. So we'll do it here. And it was fantastic.
Um, you keep dropping the segues. It's perfect. Let's talk about the other guy you're talking about here, Don Cheadle. Look, Don Cheadle's great. Going all the way back to when you and I reviewed the first Iron Man, like Don Cheadle absolutely is the best roadie. You know, Terrence Howard, all due respect, but Marvel made the right call here. I'm sorry, he's fantastic. I loved him in this. Even after we found out what we found out. By the way, kids, spoilers. If you haven't watched, oh man, we've already wrecked it for you. I've not read anything going into this to find out the truth of whether or not this was the intention from the beginning. When I say beginning, I mean years ago, or if this was just shoehorned in. Rhodey being a Skrull and the timeline to which they say, and the director of the show's confirmed that he was taken in Civil War. That the Rhodey we see recuperating when Stan Lee comes to Tony's house as a delivery man and he has a package for Tony Stank, that's not Rhodey, that's the Skrull. So, Phil, we're supposed to believe that's a Skrull. A Skrull was in the battle for Earth and cried on his knees as Tony died and breathed his last. All that's a Skrull, 100%. Look, dude, let's be honest with each other. This was shoehorned in. This was written in after the fact. This has been retconned to fit. I mean, come on, Phil. What are we doing here? I'm not saying that, again, I love Don Cheadle. I loved him in this show. I'm not a huge fan of this, to be honest with you.
Um, I think this is Don Cheadle's best performance in anything he's done in any Marvel property. I think he
Agreed.
did his best acting in this show. And again, sadly, it's going to be overlooked. But I definitely agree it was retconned in. But there are things now that add when you add the layer that is a scroll in there, it does make you give it a second look. Like I've seen many people post a clip of him, of course, when they're talking about time travel, and he's like, "Why don't we just go back and just kill Thanos?" And he does like the hand gestures of tying a rope around his neck, and I'm just like, "Oh, well, you think about that now." It doesn't really feel like anything Rhodey did up until that point. It does kind of seem out of character when you really do look at it.
Mm.
Like, there are things that, like I said, if we really look at it, but again, it's of course adding layers to things that already existed that didn't have that intent. You can interpret some of those scenes later differently. Um, even when you look at stuff like how his involvement in Falcon and Winter Soldier, for example, he's in the first episode, correct?
Hmm.
And his conversation he has with Sam, and almost like he's fine with them putting the shield up and having it in a museum, or like he's fine with his decision, and just some of the stuff they say in that conversation. Would it be above a scroll at that time that's trying to create an invasion to go, hey, yeah, yeah, don't be Captain America. We don't really need another Captain America. Why don't you just turn this shield in?
Mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, that makes sense, I guess. I mean, I'm also thinking, well, no, it's Civil War doesn't apply. I mean, look, to be honest, I'll have to dive into this and go back and look at his appearances since Civil War and see. I mean, look, they told us for years, they meaning uh, um, George Lucas and the gang and the Star Wars there, told us for years that, you know, Yoda trained Obi-Wan Kenobi. Then we see that godforsaken Phantom Menace. I'm sorry, everybody. Flick. And no, Yoda didn't train Obi-Wan. This dude named Qui-Gon Jinn trained him. Excuse me? So yeah, this has been happening. It's Marvel's not the first guys to do this nonsense. Uh, it's look, dude, it's not ruined it for me. I'm not blaming the ratings of the show on that or anything like that. I just I don't know, dude. I get why they felt the need that it had to be somebody you cared about, somebody important, somebody essential that could get close to the president. But like, I don't know. I don't know. And look, here's another question for you, man. Why go back that far? Why couldn't it have happened after Endgame? Wouldn't that have fixed a lot of the problems that people have with this now? Why go back that far?
I do think it fixes kind of a plot hole of when would Rhodey have been vulnerable enough for them to switch him? And I
Hmm.
think the idea of them switching him while he was in the hospital is actually kind of smart. I even like the continuity of when he gets rescued at the end, and we see the real Rhodey. He still has the hospital gown
Hmm.
on. But this was always going to be an issue with this show. You needed to make one of the Avengers into a scroll for it to feel like it mattered. You needed this shocker of, oh no, this is a main character. But the problem is, again, you have to deal with the budget of the show. You got to deal with the logistics of how do we get somebody that's an Avenger on this show. We're also paying Sam Jackson, and then also like who on that main cast can we replace? And now, again, if it were me and I was doing it in the movies, you could have gotten around this because again, you could have had the end credit sequence of Endgame, zoom back down there at the end of at the bottom of the mountain, and Natty's body is down there, turns into a scroll.
Oh,
You had so many ways you could have did this, but again,
yeah.
if you're not gonna do like one of the bigger stars, and you're not gonna and you're also doing this at a point where the Avengers are off the board, and you had to do it with like a side character, it was always gonna be tough to make this work.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree with that, man. It makes you wonder now if they're going to go back and pull this. I mean, used to be it was anybody could be Hydra. Now it's going to be anybody could be a scroll. So, dude, what if you're a scroll Hydra? Like,
Yeah, I mean, they could have done so many interesting things with if they wove it through the movies because they had more options because you have access to the bigger stars, you have access to the bigger budget,
Mhm.
you have more exposure that way. Um, but it was always going to be tough to try and make this into a thing that's relegated to the streaming platform and only had 6 episodes.
Mm, yeah, I think 8 would have been a great number. I don't know if I would have been here for 13, but I think 8 would have been. I'm thinking would 2 more hours
Um,
have, you know what I mean?
8 would have been good, and but I think you could have done 13. I think the way to go with this show, and they missed it again. That's a budgetary thing. That's a limitation from all of the stuff you would have to include and the people you would have to pay and interconnect with. I think
Mhm.
this should have been the show that finally tied Agents of Shield into MCU continuity. Because I think you
Mm.
could have tied in stuff like the Coulson stuff. You could have, you could have made the Maria Hill stuff make more sense as well. Um, where it's not so much that Nick wants to do this all on his own. He went and finally went and sought out the guy that he trusts more than anybody, and Coulson. And Coulson would have brought in his team, and that would have been a way to have him have like this covert team along with Nick that made this show more interesting. I thought that
Mhm.
also would have gave this show some appeal because you wouldn't have been able to, like I said, get some of the main stars, but you could
Mhm.
have got somebody from one of your longest running television shows, and that would have been the thing to get that fan base more interested in the show.
Mhm. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I don't, yeah, yeah, much better entry point, I think, as well.
Yeah, and I mean, it just makes too much sense. Like the character that Chloe Bennett plays on the show, this Daisy, was a big part of Secret Invasion. She was on Nick's side. She was one of the recruits that Nick Fury picked as like his like Black Ops team. They could have made this work if they did other things, but again, it's just the limitations of trying to connect it with other things and make it this self-contained thing at the same time. But also say, look, it also ties to this, and look, hey, this person could have been a scroll all along. But you can't go full on in that without actually making making the connections, paying the amount of money you would have had to get a bigger name on this show. It
Mhm.
was just always going to be a tough juggling act.
Mhm. For sure, for sure. Um, let's also talk about Big Ben Mendelsohn as Talos. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this Ben guy, Phil, because if anybody comes at Ben, I got a problem with that guy because Ben is effing great. He is, dude, isn't he? He's so good. Like I, I loved him in the films. I love him here. He's just look that is a home run getting this guy. I mean, obviously Sam Jackson's class act. I mean, getting this dude in the MCU, who managed to sign that guy's name on the dotted line, give that man a raise because Ben Mendelsohn is fantastic as Talos.
He is fantastic. Again, I really hate that the acting in the show is going to get undersold. But
Yeah,
there's so many scenes between Nick and Telos where they're both doing such great acting. Um, the scene on the train where he tells them about having how him and his mother had to travel, and you know the story tells them where they used to play the game of tell me the truth, and that's how he gets him to tell him how many scrolls are on the planet, and it's just such a well acted scene. It's such a well written scene. The argument in the bar where he's trying to have English breakfast
yeah,
um, is also great. Their argument in the car where he tells him like, "We did that. We helped you get where you are." All of that stuff is really good. And Sam's reaction to it afterwards, where he's just like, "We're here." He's like, "Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. You weren't paying attention because you were busy telling me we did that. We did that.
yeah.
We're here."
That's a great little bit of humor. I love that too.
Yeah, yeah, they have so many really good scenes together. Yeah, he's really good in this role. When he does finally get his untimely demise, it's such a great way to write the character off. Um, but again, that was one of those they didn't stick the landing because they did something really interesting with the Talos character and the sitting president in Ritson, where I was like, okay, well, he didn't die in vain. He 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 did all that to prove that I'm not like the other scrolls. All scrolls are not the same, and that should have shown Ritson like it's not all of us. And then Ritson still does this hateful speech on the last episode where he's like, "Oh, aliens, get off this planet." So I'm just like, okay, great. What was the point of that? Like, what was the point of all the great stuff you did with Telos? Then, like, you just you just completely erased it off the board.
Terrible, terrible. I hated. I beyond hated that. I mean, and look, anytime a character is killed, it has to mean something. there should be no wasted movement. There really shouldn't be. Not every show can be perfect. Not every film can be perfect. I totally get it. There's hits and misses all the time. I get it. But dude, his death has to mean something. And when we see the president do this nonsense, I'm like, all right, I don't know what it meant now. Like, it meant something to Fury. Will it mean anything to anybody else? Like, that's the shame of this. I mean, there's a few different moments of the writing that really, like you said, that last episode dropped the ball, man.
Yeah, it very much felt like you needed Ritson to take this hard heel turn to build to whatever they're doing with the Captain America stuff and whatever they're doing later. But it just didn't make sense with what we saw in the episodes leading up to that. Now,
Mhm.
maybe we're supposed to take this to believe that Ritson's an idiot and that's why he's going to get voted out and
Mhm.
he's going to be replaced by Thunderbolt Ross later. But yeah, no, if anything, this just made me feel like Ritson was incredibly incompetent.
100%, 100%. We'll circle back to the commander in chief here in a moment. Kingsley Ben-Adir as Gravik. This guy also played. I knew him. He played Malcolm X in One Night in Miami. Very interesting flick, Phil. If you've not caught it,
I
um,
haven't seen it.
it's so it's directed by Regina King, who's great.
Hmm.
Uh, it's an entertaining film. I say entertaining. It's weird to use that word with the content, the subject matter that's in this movie, but it's good. It's good. It's very talky, which I'm here for. Look, I'm a Kevin Smith guy, so I'm all about films with a lot of dialogue. I'm totally fine with that. So I enjoyed it. I don't know because I've never done my homework to see how it was received. Oh, it's very well received. Are you kidding me? 98% approval rating. So yeah, that's good. That's good. And was nominated for awards and won some awards. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. I think it's really good. It's worth your time. Um, but yeah, he played Malcolm X in that film. All right, look, this is no fault of his own because he's great. But there are just moments when, as I did that rant earlier about villains not understanding or seeing what's in front of them because they're so bent on revenge. I don't know. I don't know. When you're shooting your own people, God, man, it's just messed up. Like, you know, the thing is, nobody can really fight him. Like when they all jump him in that episode and say, "That's it, we've got to take this guy down," and he just tears through all of them as if they're not there. I mean, holy cow! What do you think about this guy as the heavy for this series?
I think he's a really good villain.
Hmm.
I think that once they turned him into generic villain that is just power hungry, and his entire plot is just to make himself more powerful and seek revenge, then I was less interested. But everything
Hmm.
he was doing for the first few episodes, I was in. Um, a lot of his monologues, just the way that he was just cold and calculating, I loved it. The stuff with him and Gaia, where he basically is like, I don't think I can trust you, and every step of the way he's kind of testing her and doing like this really cold stuff and like rubbing her nose in it. Like the end of the episode where he finds out the other guy, I can't remember the other girl's name, gave up information. He takes him out in the middle of the field, and he just doesn't even look back at the guy when he sends the other scroll to kill him. And he looks Gaia dead in her eyes, like, "Yeah, this is what will happen to you."
Yeah,
It's so good. Um, he does so many other things. Like Guy is like trying to give him this monologue, and he just shoots her like before she can even finish it. The argument he has with Talos in that restaurant where he doesn't even move when he's like getting all upset and he jumps up in his face,
that
doesn't
was
even
good.
move. All
Yeah.
the other guys jump out of their seats and they morph into him. Fantastic. He's like I said, he's a very interesting villain. I just wish they had done more with him in the last two episodes instead of just making him um, big boss to lose against other overpowered character in this superhero fight to end the show. It would have been much more interesting if they ended the show on a question mark and left it open ended. You didn't have to kill him. You could have just had the what if, or what if he's dead? What if he's still out there? What if he's still out there uh, with all these other scrolls at his command and the threat's not gone? I think that's a much better way to end the show because you still have the paranoia going on, and you still have the question marks around whether his conflict is just, all these things. But instead, you just were like, oh no, he's just a bad guy. He doesn't care about his people at all. He's a hypocrite.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Maybe
I think,
that's what did it to me, man. I think it's what soured me on it in the end.
yeah, I just don't think that it. I just don't think that it worked. Because I was just so interested in his character all the way up through the show. And I felt like the same thing kind of happened with Falcon and Winter Soldier, where the main villain of that show was so interesting until she just turned around and was like, ah, well, sometimes you got to kill people. Like, well, wait, you no, the thing that made you interesting is that um, you were in this gray area. And then once you just become like this binary character, that takes away everything that we built up about you. It's just not as interesting anymore.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, they kind of cut him off at the knees by the end.
But he
Killian,
does a great job here. I
he
should say that
does.
he is a good actor. He is, I believe he's playing Bob Marley in the biopic that's coming up soon. He's got a lot of work. I believe he's also in the Barbie movie. Um, so I think we'll be seeing more of this guy's face for sure.
Oh my God, he looks like Bob as well. He really does favor Bob. I'm not kidding. Yeah, 100%.
Tom Clark 6M podcast is sponsored in part by Radius Law Group. Every day, Radius helps individuals, families, small businesses, and nonprofit organizations throughout North Carolina, Florida, and Pennsylvania resolve their legal issues by providing effective legal counsel in the areas of estate planning, as well as elder law and Medicaid. Radius Law holds the radical belief that working with a lawyer can indeed be enjoyable. So give them a call at 1-800-519-5667 for more information and tell them that Tom Clark 6M podcast sent you.
Killian Scott is Pagon. He was Gravik's second in command. He supposedly has ambition and wants to be a leader, but he doesn't have the guts to take it. He also portrays the human counterpart whose form Pagon took in the final episode. So some of these actors, yes, we see them in human form, but it's also them as Skrulls as well. Let's see, Samuel at Awadmi, which I'm sure I'm butchering that, as Beto, a rebel Skrull. We also have Richard Dahmer as Prescott, a former S.H.I.E.L.D. agent who uncovered the Skrulls' plan to invade Earth. We'll get back to Mr. President Dermot Mulroney, who's having, I don't want to say, don't call it a comeback. I've been here for years, but sort of a comeback maybe as President Ritson. He's also a character in The Righteous Gemstones, and that is an insane show, but I'm here for it. I'm a fan. What do you think of Dermot Mulroney here, man? I think he fits the role. He's a really good actor too, by the way. What do you think about him as the president?
I thought he fit as a president. I just think some of the things he was given to do in the role were not good. I think the character itself just kind of didn't work for me. There's
Yeah.
so many stupid things he does. I'm just kind of like, are we just supposed to believe that this guy is just kind of an idiot, or?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I mean, he's fine. He feels like a guy that is believable as a president. Um, but yeah, just wasn't a fan of this character.
I did like that moment when Rhodey takes him by the elbow, puts his hand on his arm, and he looks down as if to say, "Why are you touching me?" Like he knew something was wrong. Like you see even the closest people to the sitting president in clips and whatnot, they're not putting their hands on them.
Hmm.
That's sort of you know what I mean. It's like you don't touch the man. I mean, that was a nice little something they just threw in there. So there's moments of this character being fine, but I like Mulrooney quite a bit. But I'm with you. I think the character itself is just. I hate to say it, but you maybe could have put anybody in this role, to be honest.
Yeah, I just didn't really care for the character. He just does so many things that don't make sense to me.
Yeah.
Again, you had this big moment with Talos, where Talos had this last stand, and regardless, Brody comes in there and shows him the intel on the scrolls, and it's just like he didn't see any of that. It's like he didn't remember any of that.
Yeah, good. Yeah, good
It,
call.
it's like everything that happened before that. He didn't use any kind of common sense looking around like this doesn't make sense. Why is
Hmm.
he showing what why is he showing me this now? The timing of this don't seem fishy to you?
Right. Right. Of course.
Like and everything with Rhodey, he didn't look around and think like, man, what's going on with you? Why did you come here? Why did Nick tell me right away, don't trust you before you walked in here?
And isn't it funny how this really got my attention? How few people there were around the president at any given time in this show.
Yeah.
You know what I
I,
mean?
that was one of those budgetary things you could tell. It was like there are parts of this show that look good, but there are parts of it that you could tell this was a TV show and they were trying to cut corners. And those hospital scenes definitely felt cheap.
Oh.
They felt like a TV show. There's another scene where Fury is arguing with Gaia and they're alone in like one of those safe houses,
Mhm.
and it was like they couldn't figure out a way to end the scene, so they just have this siren flashing by, and he's like, "Oh no, I gotta go." And it's like, wait a minute, how do you even know that those police officers are here for you? Like, what is this? Like, but again, it was one of those cheap TV show ploys that, like, why did they do this? And that happened a few times. That's why I'm like, this show cost $212 million, but at the same time it feels very much like a cheap TV show sometimes.
Yeah, don't flatter yourself, Nick. There's other crimes being committed in the city apart from your superhero stuff.
Yeah, how would they
Jeez.
have even known you were in there?
Yeah. My God. It says the X Files. What are we doing here? Yeah.
Yeah, there were a few things like that that I'm like, what? This kind of doesn't make sense. Like, why? Huh? Or I mean, there's parts of the scene where the bombing happens and he gets pulled away and put in that van by the other guys, and then he ends up on a train. It's like, how's this guy moving around so much? Didn't it, like nobody sees this guy just like in the middle of all of these incidents. He's just like
Mm.
going from incident and incident, and nobody is like, "Hey, man, I saw this guy here," or his face isn't already plastered all over the TV. It wasn't until Rhodey put the footage out there of him killing Maria that then he was like, "Oh no, yeah, it's gonna be on every TV everywhere." Like, wait a
Yeah.
minute, this guy's been everywhere anyway, and nobody's seen him.
Yeah. Yeah. No kidding. Jeez. Yeah, I had a problem with that as well. Let's talk about Gaia, Amelia Clark here. Once again, it's not the actress in question. I think she does great. I just there's moments of this where I can't figure out does she hate her dad right now or does she not hate him? Like there's I don't know. I don't know. Maybe they gave you exactly what you needed and it flew over my head. But there's moments when I think maybe it's because there's so many scenes in between the two of them together on screen that I kind of lose the connection they have, and then I kind of forget, wait a minute, is she like still upset at him or is she okay? Like, I don't know. Again, it goes back to the writing. What do you think about Amelia Clark as Gaia here?
I like the Gaia character, but I
Mhm.
don't think that there was enough. This was another where I feel like if there were more episodes, we could have gotten a better idea of who she is as a character, what are her motivations. Because I do think that, like Robic, um, she had reason to be upset. She
Yeah.
had reason to feel betrayed, and she had reason to be upset with her father in particular because it's just kind of like, no, you've been a lapdog. You've done everything this guy has asked you to do, and what do you have to show for it? Nothing. Mom's dead, and you're still licking this guy's boots. He hasn't come any closer to giving us a home. He hasn't given you any answer. Meanwhile, all you've done is make this guy the top super spy in the world, and we're just here. And she was right.
Yeah.
So I think even when it makes sense for her to side with Gravik, and then it also makes sense for her to look around like, oh, he's taking it too far. But that doesn't mean I agree with you, Talos. I still don't agree with you. I just don't agree with him. And I think by the end of the show, you get this idea that she had to destroy this monster that she helped create, but it was still not like she was gonna all of a sudden start being friendly with Nick and start working with him, because she still saw him as a hypocrite. She still saw him as a guy that used the scrolls for the most part and never had any intentions on finding him a home.
That kind of fell apart from me right there. That kind of really fell apart from me. Like, did he intend on lying to them and use them all as subversive agents for real? Or did it? I don't know. I don't know. The Fury that we see here is not necessarily the Fury that I would have believed that would have done all that. Like, it reminds me of Winter Soldier when he's explaining to Cap the need to have all these ships, and like Cap is protesting all of this, and Fury is trying to get through to him by being essentially a nice guy and saying, "Look, we have to be ready. Like, this is, I'm telling you the truth. I'm showing you everything. I'm not hiding anything from you. We're doing this." Like, it's almost like, there's two sides of this. There's everything that makes sense to him, but that logic is only his logic and not shared by anybody else around him sometimes.
I think it was in character for Nick because it was everything we've seen him do since his first appearance in the MCU.
Mm,
Um, everybody is pieces. They are a piece of a chess set to him. Yeah, we've come to like him as a character. Yeah, we've seen his vulnerabilities. Yeah, we've seen his brighter moments. But he's also a character that wants to protect the country and the planet by any means necessary. And so, in order to do that, yeah, he doesn't mind using people if that gets him there. Yeah, I might have told people a lie, but what's more important? You having your feelings hurt because I lied to you, or us
mm.
still being safe? And I feel like that's who he always. I mean, look at what we see him admit to doing with the harvest. Like, this is a moment where he came out of the blip, and this should have been like the sobering moment for him. No, he looked around like, we need to be equipped. These are all people that I've been friendly with. These are all people that I have helped bring together. But
Mm,
I've also lied to them. He lied to them in Avengers. He lied to them about Coulson's death. He
true.
used that to get them together. And then the second they separated, he used he kept their DNA just in case to use it. He's done several very unethical things in the means of protecting and the better good. And so I definitely believe he would have lied to the Skrulls because it was in his better interest at the moment to just be like, oh, well, sure, I'll find you a home, but for the meantime, I need you to do this for me.
He's lucky that not more came after him, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things that he could have gotten exposed on. Uh, yeah, I mean, deep down, I think we all want to like Coulson. I think we all want to like Nick Fury because he's such a complex character. Um, but he also does things that are very much unethical at times, and things that can be considered very selfish as well. Um, but that's who he's been for the entirety of the MCU. Like what you were explaining in Winter Soldier, where he's telling him, like, yeah, no, this is the future. We got to be ahead of this. We got to be pragmatic. Um, yeah, that's who he is because he's on the other side. He is an overseer. He's not a guy like Cap that can afford to be optimistic and wide-eyed and is like, oh well, we'll just get through do sheer will. No, no, I have to have a plan.
Yeah, he thinks he's ahead of the curve, but his way is hurting other people, whether he knows it or not. Plus,
Yes,
it's not up to him to play God. It's like, what was the movie Tom Cruise, Minority Report, where the people were getting locked up for crimes they hadn't committed yet? Like,
yes,
what?
yes. But no, that's totally in Nick's character because he's like, no, if it means public safety, then I'll do what I need to do.
Right.
Hey, this question has never really been answered because he wasn't around for any of Civil War. Do you think he would have disagreed with the Accords? Absolutely not.
Mm.
he would have been on Tony's side with the Accords.
Right.
He wouldn't have been on Cap's side.
Oh no, of course not. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and that's but again, that's what makes his storyline in Civil War so interesting. Sorry, and Winter Soldier so interesting because this is the guy that kept secrets from them, but then everything he believed in, he later found out was a lie.
Yeah.
All of it was Hydra, and it even above him, there are lies that he doesn't know about.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. There's yeah, that makes a lot of sense too. Um I got to bring her up. Olivia Colman is Sonia Fallsworth. She's MI6. She is frustratingly annoying because she's one of those characters. She's not necessarily a villain, but she's not necessarily a hero either. Like, I don't know. She's a government agent. That tells you what you need to know.
Hmm.
She's one of those people who could never exist in the real world ever, Phil. You know what I mean? Like ever. That voice and that how nothing affects her. She doesn't care. She's stone cold. Dude, look, this is one of those people like this person would never actually exist in the world. Like I have a better chance believing Gravik's a real person than I do. The actress is great. Look, that's how she played it. That's how they wanted her to play it. It came off wonderful. But the character, I don't know. There's moments where I'm like, the ham that's in this scene, it's just way too much for me. You know what I mean?
I actually disagree. I thought
Really?
she was one of my favorite characters from this show. I thought seriously, I thought she was one of my favorite characters from this show. The fact that she always kind of one ups everybody,
Yeah,
and she's
she
kind of in this
does.
spot. She's in this spot where Fury was a few years ago, and after the blip, Fury came back different. Um, she is kind of in this spot where it's like I don't know. And even when she doesn't know anything, like when she didn't know Rhodey was a scroll, she just was kind of like, "Oh, well, this is kind of your fault." Like she kind of comes around back to it later, like this is your fault. But I just think she does so many things here that are absolutely hilarious. When she figures out that he put the camera on the owl and she puts the eye patch on it to look like him, it's hilarious.
Right.
Um, she has so many quips in this thing. When she tortures the guy in that butcher shop, I guess that was is where that was because there was all the raw meat back there. Very great scene. And she's just ahead of time, like, "Hey, where's the escape hatch? And why do you need to know? Oh, just a hunch. Just a hunch." And then she proceeds to torture this guy and just completely just like gets everything she wants from him, and she's out of there before Gravik gets in there. Um, Completely untouched. She shows up at the couple's house and she's talking to the guy, and he comes out of nowhere with this big shotgun nowhere, and he's like, "Yeah, well, that sounds like a problem." And what is the guy's name that comes behind him with the gun? She's like, "Yeah, it might be a problem." And he goes, "That's not my name. No, 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 that's the guy with the gun behind you."
Yeah, right, right. Yeah, yeah.
No, she's great. She is. If you're a Harry Potter fan, she's basically Dolores Umbridge, but as a spy. And she's just like there's a little bit about her that is kind of icky and uneasy, but there's also something you want to like about her because she always kind of gets a quip up or one up on somebody. When a guy thinks he has her at the end, and he pulls a gun on his wife, and she's just like, and just shoots him. Just completely wipes him out. Um, I thought she was great. I thought she delivered her lines very well. I thought her acting was great. Um, and I think if you're setting up this kind of new guard of um, overseers like Nick was, and you have Nick in Sword now, you have um, whoever is pulling the strings and putting together what I'm assuming is the Thunderbolts, um, and you have that entity showing up, and now you have whatever she's trying to build with the MI6, which I'm assuming is going to lead to maybe MI13, maybe some Captain Britain stuff.
Mm.
Um, and I really liked it. I really like that we're now getting these different branches of like these like I said, overseers of like these government branches where it's like, we've gotten burned too many times by all this superhero stuff and all this alien stuff. We kind of need an answer. We need to start figuring this out. And I very much like her approach to Guy at the end, where she's just like, "Look, I'm going to tell you outright, I'm using you, but you're using me too. I'm
Right.
not going to do what Nick is doing with you, but come over here with me, and we'll do what's best for our people." It's kind of one of those things where she looked at all the mistakes he did and was like, "I'm not going to do that. Let me just sweep this in here under the rug, and I'll just adapt my plan, but essentially do the same thing he did." But the difference is, I'm telling you outright that I'm using you.
Dude, I'm so here for Captain Britain. I want it so much. I hope they get the right actor and I hope he looks great. And I'm so here for it, man. I really am.
Yeah, if I don't know if you read the Paul Cornell um, Captain Britain in the MI-13 book that was out at one point. So very good. If we can get a show or something with Sonya's character and that team in this show, I'm all here for it.
Hmm. Are you surprised we didn't get a post credits at the end of episode 6?
Uh, no, because just the way that the last episode felt very much rushed, and it felt very much like I hit all the greatest hits, hit all the final act stuff that we usually hit in all our movies, and let's get out.
Right.
Yeah, I wasn't surprised because this last episode very much felt like a mess.
Hmm. We've only got a few left. We got Charlene Woodard as Vara and also Priscilla Davis. This is a character I got all day for, and it's a character that we didn't know existed. When Fury comes home and puts on a wedding band for the first time, you're like, wait a minute, what? I mean, is giving Fury a wife does all right. I mean, does it for his character, does it make sense to give him a tie to anybody at this point? Because I think she is tremendous, and I love the idea of it. Does it make sense though?
It doesn't make sense, and I think that's what makes it so great in the show. If it makes sense, is that uh, we think of Nick as this guy that has no attachments, that he would not allow himself to be tied down or affected by anybody. Uh, but again, as he shows in this show, that's one of the biggest mistakes he's made, and not just that you have a wife that is a scroll. um, I thought the reveal for the wife was one of the best things about this show. Are you kidding me? When he comes in and she's in there um, as a scroll without her disguise, and she's making food,
Hmm.
and then when he walks in and she's human again, and it gives us that brief second of, wait a minute, does he know?
Right.
And then it cuts to Otis Redding. Great cliffhanger for that episode. Uh, but I think everything they did with the Vara character and his relationship with her was very good. I thought her whole backstory was very good, very interesting. Um, the way they played it at one point, like we thought she was a double agent, was also very good.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and even her reasoning for not wanting to kill Fury because of her backstory and the disguise she decided to pick was also very good. Again, such good acting. That standoff they have where they're talking to each other and then they eventually pull the guns on each other and then decide not to shoot each other. Really, really good stuff. Leaving it open ending for the entire series of does Fury like her disguise, or does he actually love this woman?
Mm.
And then we finally get like the reveal at the end when she is with him as herself as a scroll that of course he loves her. And I thought that was a good way to end everything. Like even if Ritson didn't get it, we got a definitive answer that um Nick Fury was not discriminating. He wasn't just in love with her because she disguised herself as a black woman. He was in love with the scroll.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm still up in the air about whether or not I'm okay with it in terms of does it make sense for his character. But regardless of whether or not I like it, I think she is tremendous. I think that she did everything right. I'm glad that the character was well written. I'm glad that she didn't turn heel herself. I'm glad that he didn't kill her because it kind of made you think he shot her in that moment at the kitchen table. So I'm glad he didn't. I'm glad that she made it, and I assume we're going to see her in the Marvels because she got on the ship with him.
Yeah, I assume so. But I also like the Varys stuff because you also get this you get this juxtaposition of her and Gaia's character. I
Hmm.
love the stuff where they're in there talking and she tries to mock their relationship and she's just kind of like, well, he doesn't really love you. He loves your disguise. And she just kind of looks at her like, you're so stupid. Like you're a typical teenager that thinks you know everything. You don't know
Mm.
anything. You don't know what it's like to keep a relationship together. You don't know anything about anything. You just you're just mad at the world and you think you know everything. Um, Such a great dynamic I thought that they played off there. And I think that is one of the great things about Gaia's character as well, is that Gaia thinks she has it all figured out and she doesn't really understand all of Talos's sacrifices for her because she's only looking at it through the lens of what she lost and what she doesn't have.
Right, right, of course, yeah. I do like the dynamic with those two. I thought that was, and the fact that they both like went totally John Wick in that moment was actually very fun to watch.
Oh my god, the the setup for that scene is so dumb, but the actual scene of them fighting the scrolls is cool. But
Yeah.
Vara's excuse of why she didn't run makes no sense. It's, hey, well, you know the scrolls are gonna come and kill you, right? Well, I would kind of rather be killed in my home. You mean where they know you're gonna be and they're gonna come directly here? That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah, it was like as soon as they had that talk and she said that, somebody bust through the window.
Like they were outside waiting for her to finish talking. You ever
Yeah,
notice how like characters never get interrupted in these things? That always, as soon as she finishes her line, is when they bust in.
yeah. I think that's why I liked it so much. Where when Gaia was trying to monologue and Gravik just shot her.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because that makes more sense. Bad guys would never sit there and let you get done talking. Um, we also have Kate Finneran as Rosa Dalton, a scientist replaced by a Skrull. We've also got other characters that pop up here. Kobe Smulders as Maria Hill. Spoiler alert, children. Maria Hill evidently is no longer with us. She's been here from the beginning of the first Avengers film. Dude, evidently she's not a Skrull because we never saw her return. How do you feel about them killing Maria like that?
Uh, Man, it feels like Maria's a character that they didn't do enough with. Just given everything she does in the comics, everything she goes through as a character in the comics, we didn't see enough of her. But it's
Mm,
again one of those juggling acts where, you know, how much can you use her in this movie? How much can you use her in this TV show?
mhm,
When is it a conflict of schedule? When is it a budgetary thing? And so it does seem like it's a shame that we didn't get more of her, but I also could see her probably looking around like, I've been doing this for a long time. I've been around since the first Avengers movie. I don't want to keep coming back. And that's another thing we're kind of running into where people are like, oh, well, I've done 6 of these movies or 3 of these TV shows and a movie and all this other stuff. I've now finished up my contract, so it's time for me to go off and do something else. And so I would have liked to see more of her. I didn't like to see her die this way, but in my mind, I'm kind of looking like, oh, this is probably Cody is wrapping up with Marvel.
yeah, it's a shame. I didn't want to see it happen. I hate that she's gone. I hate it because I just love that character so much, man. I'm with you. I don't think. Hey, where's her husband and kids? Where's her wife and kids? We never got a backstory at all with this girl, man.
We do get to see. I think that's her mother in episode 3,
That's
right?
right. Yeah, yeah, that's fair.
Um,
But no one else showed up, which means she had nobody.
yeah, I really like the way they handled her death, though. I thought that the way that Gravik did it, and There's so much there's so much subtext to that she was loyal to Nick all the way through the end, and the face that killed her was Nick.
Mm.
Damn.
Oh man.
So much subtext there, and it's just, I mean, just even her questioning him when they're playing chess and questioning his motives and what he's doing, like, are if you're not prepared to do this, if you're not ready, you shouldn't be doing this because somebody's gonna get killed, and then she's the one that gets killed. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, just so many. it's so many good things that they did with the first two episodes, and it felt like if it would have kept that kind of tone and direction for the entirety of the show, it'd have been a much better show. Because I mean, even the the first 20 minutes of episode one, where we get the agent in there with like his like entire conspiracy theory, and he's trying to convince Ross of everything, and he's manic and paranoid. All of that stuff is so good, and
Yeah, yeah.
I feel like if it would have kept that kind of tone, it would have been a much better show. It didn't need to veer into like all of the big superhero action set pieces. It could have stayed espionage.
Yeah, yes. Yes, 100% agree. We also got Martin Freeman back as Everett Ross. Spoiler alert, kids. Everett Ross, Agent Ross, was a Skrull. The good news is they could have took him at any moment. He didn't necessarily have to be gone. Like the Everett Ross we've always known. Please God, tell me that's always been Everett Ross. Please don't tell me that just like Rhodey in Civil War, we haven't loved Agent Ross this whole time. It's been someone else. I mean, um, so yeah, he's great as always. I continue to wait until he and Doctor Strange share a scene together, so we can get Sherlock and Watson back on the screen at the same time. So
Yeah.
hopefully that's
Uh,
coming.
yeah, I mean, even if Ross was captured before the events of the first Black Panther movie, it does make sense that he would want to get close to somebody in Wakanda, and he would want to make his way into Wakanda because at that point, no other American got that close. And this is a
It's
guy
true.
that now has made a relationship at that point with the king of Wakanda, and later um, made a relationship with Shuri. For a scroll, that's a pretty cushy position to be in and have, you know, some kind of not just a relationship with them, but actually be close enough to get assets like vibranium and all these other things. Makes perfect sense for a scroll to try and infiltrate there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I'm curious to see. I'm guessing Armor Wars is going to be when we get some answers to all these questions. So I'm curious to find out. We also have to mention Otunda Fagbenlu, which I think is how you pronounce it, as Rick Mason. That's a callback from the Black Widow flick, where he's basically, who's the guy from James Bond? Is it Q? They can
Yes.
get him whatever he wants, right? So it was cool to see him here. I hope we get more of Rick Mason in the future.
Yeah.
By,
Uh,
by the way,
uh,
what a plain name Rick Mason is. Can we just say that?
I do think that's going to be the one of those cameos where people are like, "Who is this guy? What?"
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But again, that's the show. Like they were trying to do the tie-ins, they were trying to do the cameos. But if you can't get the bigger names, or you can't get like something that like, oh, this guy, it's not going to blow anybody away. And it very much showed that this is the best they could try to do with connectivity
Mhm.
for 6 episodes. And like I said, with budget and all these other things, man, what could have been is always going to be one of those things that hampers this show.
Yeah, that's fair. It really is fair. Yeah. But to be honest, they couldn't have done all of this. To your point, if they had tried all this in the films, even just planting seeds, I think they would have created some confusion with the Thanos storyline, honestly, because it would have been, wait a minute, is the villain Thanos and his guys, or is it, the Skrulls? What's going on here? I can see why they saved it, but yeah,
Yeah,
I don't know.
I mean, I just think Secret Invasion should have been a movie. And
Yeah, same.
even if you weren't going to do it as a movie and you want to do it as a mini series, you could add the mini series focus on all the stuff that Nick was doing behind the scenes to prepare for the Skrull invasion, and have that as a tie-in to a later movie.
That's excellent. Yeah, that's excellent. We did not mention the FXN bit of fluff that's in here, where they're flat out, parroting Fox News as if Fox News isn't a parody in and of itself. Look, I get it, and I'm glad that Christopher McDonald as Chris Steames is an idiot, but turns out he's a scroll anyway. But at the
Yeah,
same time, I kind of don't like that we're giving that network even if it's a parody. I kind of don't like that we're giving them publicity in Marvel, but it is what it is. And by the way, kids, never forget Christopher McDonald is Shooter McGavin. So never forget
Um,
that.
I like the idea that if you're gonna try and sow mistrust, the best way to do it is through this like crazy right wing television show where
Yes.
they're trying to be this fear monger, and what people that watch this stuff don't understand is that guy's the enemy. He wants you to be afraid so that you do things out of character and so that you trust somebody that you shouldn't trust.
Mm-hmm. That's starting to feel pretty weird, pretty real.
Yeah, and I think that's why that felt relevant here. Like, and if this the political show, that felt very relevant.
Yeah, again, I get the intention. I just hate the idea of giving any of those people voice. But no, it makes sense. Um, Good cast all the way around. Again, I don't have issue with really with anybody in the cast. I love the idea of Secret Invasion. There were so many questions going into this about who could we get, who will we see? Is this going to be all B players? No disrespect, or is this going to be A players as well? Is it going to be a mix? I mean, what we got, does it live up to what I wanted? No, it doesn't. Am I as brokenhearted and distraught and ready to go jump off a cliff as some fans are? Of course not. I mean, the biggest problem I have is the retconning Rhodey as a Skrull. That's my biggest, for me personally, it's my biggest takeaway from this entire show. It's the timing of him being taken, and that's the biggest problem I have with the entire thing. Now, Phil, for all we know, the timing of this is intentional, very intentional, and they're going to pay that off in a future property where him not having been around as his true self is going to pay off at some point.
Hmm.
One can only hope. I,
Yeah.
I don't know. Is there a way you save that at some point to make people happy, or at least to tell people, look, we got this. Don't worry, we're going to do something with it.
It sounds crazy, but at this point, I trust Marvel. They've done things before where people are like, "Oh, I hated that," and then when they give it more screen time and we actually see them go back to it, it's like, oh wait, I actually kind of like this. Like prime example, Trevor Slattery. People hated it. Then you went
Right.
back to it, and it's like, wait, Trevor's kind of great. And then you did get some more payoff of like the Ten Rings stuff later when you gave them time to do more of it in the movies, or do more of it in a TV series. Just think about how much people did not like Wanda initially.
Mm,
Think about how much people didn't care for Vision initially, but with given time and given development and letting the actors fill those roles, I think people came around, and I think this thing is something that can work in the long run too. I think that if they go back and give us some backstory and they let Don Cheadle do what he does best and do some great acting, because again, I do think this is his best acting in anything he's done in any Marvel property. And so, if this is kind of like the pilot for anything they do later with Rhodey, I'm sold. I want to see more.
mm. Yeah, that's fair. Look, but we barely touched on the secret scroll stuff here. Secret scroll, super scroll stuff here. With the actual fight scene goes down between Gravik and Kaya. When this actually goes down, what do you think about this? I mean, I'll be honest with you. For me, there were moments when I didn't realize what power they had. Like some things are very obvious. The um, what was the stuff from Iron Man that they used, kind of early on? I forget now. It was
Oh,
from
Extremis.
Extremis. Yes, yes, yes. That's obvious. If it's the thing, not the thing, but if it's the Hulk's arm, that's obvious. Like Groot, of course, very obvious. Drax's arm or whatever, very obvious. There were moments of this fight scene. I'm going to have to go back and like go through slow motion and figure out what's going on. But what did you think about this fight scene overall?
I understood trying to get the Super Scrolls on the board, and my eyes definitely did light up when he mentioned Super Scrolls for the first time. I was like, oh, they're gonna bring in Super Scrolls. And so I was like, all right, if you're gonna do Super Scrolls, you could have done something cool here where you didn't make it a tie right back to Fantastic Four, but you used all four of the powers that made him seem like the Super Scroll from Fantastic Four. Because you
Yes.
did use Extremis, so you had reason for him to be able to breathe fire. That would have been a tie to Human Torch. He could
Mm-hmm.
stretch like Groot. He had the arm and everything where he gets stronger like Thing, and he had Ghost's powers, so he could turn invisible. Um, but you didn't do that. You just kind of also gave him this hodgepodge of all these other powers because of the harvest, and it just felt like it was just kind of all over the place where both characters were very overpowered, and it was just like, all right, well, why are we doing this? Like, I came away afterwards like, all right, well, why is Gaia trusting anybody? Because technically she's the most powerful being on the planet.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah.
But yeah, I think that there was a better way to do the Super Scroll stuff. I do think that the way they handled the Super Scroll's powers were dead on with how they're in the comics. Like the way that like one half of their body would morph, and the way that they were switching from powers and using them is very much like the Super Scrolls are in the comics. And so again, that part of it is exciting. When we see Gravik come out and he's like full on scroll, and he comes out and he switches to the abomination powers on one side,
Mm.
and then he's using I think extremis. No, he's using abomination's powers on one side, and then he's using um whichever member of the Black Order, the big one. Why am I drawing a blank on his name?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
But yeah, if people don't, for context, the Black Order are the four henchmen that come to Earth with Thanos,
Right.
and the big one that shows up at the beginning, I cannot remember his name, but he uses both his powers and Abomination's powers at one point, and it did look cool how they did it. But I very much felt like we didn't need a full on fight with the Super Scrolls. But the problem with that is, again, if you're not gonna have the Avengers step in, there's nobody for the Super Scroll to fight. You don't have a link to Fantastic Four here, so you got to figure out a way to make this work. And I feel like the solution for it just didn't work for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I get why you wanted to have Gaia as like this person to come in to clean up her mess in a certain way, but I would have rather them do that in a different way than have like this big Super Scroll fight. I thought the Super Scroll fight was one of the weakest things about the last episode.
Cull Obsidian. Was it Cull Obsidian?
Cold Obsidian.
Yeah.
He also uses the other member that has the psychic abilities. And for some reason, when he does that, his hand morphs and it has the same jewelry and everything on his hand.
Yes. I
It looks
caught
so
that.
silly. It looks so silly. He's doing all the same hand gestures and everything. It looks very silly. For other powers he uses the Frost Giant's powers. Sorry, Gaia uses the Frost Giant's powers. That's how she has the Ice Sword. Uh, there's a few other ones that were thrown in there. We saw Hulk leg.
Mm-hmm.
We saw Gaia uses Ghost's powers to turn invisible.
Mm-hmm.
I think she briefly phases as well, which is
She
again
does.
Ghost's power from the second Ant-Man movie. Um, uh, trying to think, did we see any other powers that I'm missing?
Captain Marvel for sure.
Yeah, Captain Marvel's of course. But again, man, once you introduce the harvest into it, I thought it would have been very smart if they just had tried to have that scientist try to guesstimate like four powers that would make this guy seemingly unstoppable. And what it ended up being is like a close to what the original Super Scroll was. So he would be able to stretch, and then like he had the strength and invisibility and fire.
Mm-hmm.
And that way you have that wink and nod to Fantastic Four without actually referencing them.
And hey, dude, it looks really good. Like, you know what I mean? If you go back and watch it, it looks really good. Like, there's not a lot here that's not working in terms of CGI. I mean, it's really not. Like, and man, when she beats him decisively. He's
Mhm.
not gonna come back. There's no comeback here for this guy. He's effing dead, man.
Yeah. Yeah, that was kind of the other thing. Like, I just felt like the way he died was very anticlimactic. Like to have just
Yeah.
this decisive death for him after everything just felt like it just didn't really work for me. I very much was not a fan of how they handled all the tie up of the guy and Gravik stuff.
And plus, you never had, unless I'm mistaken, we never really had a moment of Nick Fury basically apologizing to this guy. The closest we got, and it wasn't actually Fury talking to him.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
uh, yeah, wasn't the biggest fan of the handling of this. And then, like I said, I very much did not like that Mexican standoff we got in the hospital. That was just incredibly stupid for me. Like, why didn't you just put this guy in a wheelchair? Why are you rolling the entire hospital bed around this hospital? It just doesn't make sense. It
yeah.
doesn't make any sense at all.
Well, there you have it, kids. There's our review of this here Secret Invasion show. Just as a quick, ending comment here. This will be my post credits moment. Who do you think? Who do you think bathed all these people and shaved them and took care of them? Like, Rhodey's been down there for a long time, man, and he doesn't even have gray hair. Like, no beard. Come on. That's some great alien technology we got going on, Phil.
I mean, choices. I thought one of the cooler things we saw in episode 6 was when Sonya takes Guy in that room and we see just like this long row of all of these people that have been replaced, and that was one of those things where it's just like, man, those bits of the show they got right. It would have been great if we saw more of that, and that of course is one of those proponents to why it should have been more than 6 episodes.
Right. Yeah. Good call. Jeez. Yeah. Um. There's just here's one for you. This coming from me who never thought we'd see more than one Marvel hero in the film at the same time, and we've got fast forward years later, we've got all these amazing films. But I'm going to say this out loud anyway. Was this too ambitious of a project in the first place?
Yeah, it's gonna be tough now that you've built this entire universe where we know superheroes exist. Like that was always gonna be the question everybody asked. All right, well, why is no superhero intervening here? Why is all this stuff happening and nobody's intervening?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, they tried to gloss over it and give us a good answer with Nick of why he didn't call anybody. But
Mm-hmm.
still, you're telling me that no hero anywhere in the world sees what's going on here and is like, hey man, what is that? Maybe I should intervene. Maybe I should go
Yeah.
see what's going on over there. Nope, never happens.
Yeah, maybe I should give him some help. Well, listen, that to be fair, that's the problem in every single comic book film now with a shared universe.
Yeah. But I think the issue here is it's one thing if it's isolated in a city and superhero never involved, but this is this thing you're trying to build up as like this global threat.
True.
And it just never becomes a talking point at all. Like no superhero ever shows up like ever. Like it with anything that happens in this, you never see anything with of how it affects any superhero character. It just doesn't make sense.
I mean, to be fair though, Phil, if you're going to do this, if you're hell bent on giving us the secret invasion, you do it after Endgame, yes, because they're scattered at this point. The Avengers are no longer a team, so like, you and I are both correct here in our assessment that it doesn't make any sense that no other heroes would do anything. But like, I don't know. It just seems to me that if you're hell bent on doing it, you do it now. I don't know.
Yeah. Um yeah, that's why I kind of feel like if you were gonna make this a thing, it should have been this like espionage psychological thriller that never spilled out into like daylight and these big action scenes. It should have just always been like this kind of like warfare behind closed doors that we didn't see spill out. because it would
Mhm.
have made it that more interesting, and it would have made even more sense why none of the heroes intervened.
Yeah. It's kind of like back to the what used to be the Marvel Netflix universe with the Defenders and everything. Like they try to explain that away by saying, well, the big heroes don't have time for the street level crime. I'm like, yeah, but there's Spider-Man. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't
Yeah,
know.
but I mean, that's what I'm saying. There were so many other interconnected things, and that's why us trying to fantasy this book, this thing is never going to meet the criteria of what they can and can't do with a six arc story and again the budget. I know people are probably looking around like he said budget a lot, but yeah, it's always going to come back to how much can you pay this actor, how much can you pay to do this, how much can you pay to use the rights to this and that. It's always going to be an issue, and there's so many wacky gags that you could have done with scrolls here. You could
Mm.
have come up with so many cool things with people or characters that people don't like. Like, can you imagine if there's a scene in New York and the guy that comes and helps Nick Fury at some point is Finn Jones, Iron Fist, and he gets killed, and it turns out he was a scroll all along.
Oh my.
I mean, come on, you could have done so many cool things like that, but you can't. If you can't connect these things and you can't make the things work and you can't pay this actor and make the things line up, then you just can't do it. But I just alone, if you gave me a notebook, I could have came up with so many things that would have been cool for a Secret Invasion television show based off of all the stuff that we watch. That could have connected the Netflix shows, the short-lived ABC shows, the movies, and we just weren't gonna get that. We just
Mhm.
weren't.
There's no way. Yeah. No way. I get it. Yeah. Well, kids, for better or worse, there you have it. Couple quick things here. Number one, you could play this scroll card for the next 10 years if you want to. You could have
Yes.
this pop up in any other version of the MCU, animated or otherwise. You could just keep going back to this well. It's a well that'll never dry up because there's how many of them here did they say on the show? A
Oh
million?
man, a million.
Oof,
We don't get an answer of if Sonya frees those people in that room.
true. Very true. Man, alive. Yeah, this thing may never end. May never end. Enjoy, kids. You're not happy today, you may not be happy tomorrow. I'm just saying. Uh,
Hmm.
I don't know. Well, look, I'm still excited for anything they do in the future. I totally agree with what you said earlier. It's my same assessment of the two big pro wrestling companies, and it's the same thing I say every single time. Is whenever anyone comes at me a certain way about WWE versus AEW, I always tell them AEW has let me down far less than WWE has through the years as a fan. That's me. Can't speak
Mhm.
for everybody. That's why AEW gets a lot more rope from me and a lot more leeway. Doesn't mean they always nail it, but that's how I feel. Marvel has let me down the least number of times versus any other franchise. And I can't say any franchise has really let me down personally. Like Star Wars has done some questionable things in recent years, but nothing to make me walk away and say I'm done as a fan. What? Don't be freaking stupid. Anybody listen to this, if you feel that way, you're a friggin' idiot. I get it's all subjective, and I preach subjectivity all the time. If anyone's familiar with my content, you know I always say, Phil, you've heard me say it a million times. It's all subjective. It's okay if you don't like it. It's fine. But sometimes you got to call people morons when they deserve it because they're freaking morons. Like, you know what I mean? I'm going to walk away and burn all my stuff and never read it again. Then you're a friggin' idiot. Come
Yeah,
on,
that
man.
it's ridiculous. You don't have to do all that. But I think that to your point of because people have given Marvel so much leeway, because they've created so much goodwill, that I also think that's why some people are just so put off when something ends up being this disappointing. I mean, to that point, if you tell us we're going to try and stick as much to the book as possible with all these other things, and then you get to Secret Invasion and it's absolutely nothing like the comic, yeah, the people are going to be looking around like, well, why did we do this?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah,
there's an easy answer to why we do this. Money.
of course.
Money, that's why. And streaming needs quick content, and that was always a thing when they moved up to Disney Plus. Disney Plus is gonna need content, and the flavor of the month is Marvel. How can we get as much Marvel content on as well? And it's just like it's a gift and a curse. You're gonna get some things that really work, and you're gonna get some good content, but at the same time, you're gonna get some stuff that's quick and the quality is not going to be as good because they're trying to rush it in and get, just something to get those clicks. And that's
Hmm.
why I feel like that's part of the issue with the format of it and getting 6 episodes because, yeah, it would have been nice if we got something fully fleshed out. But they don't care about that. It's just quick content.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah, for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, kids, there you have it. There's Secret Invasion. I don't know if you liked it. I don't know if you hated it. Totally up to you. If this makes you walk away from the MCU, I don't know what more to say to you. I'm not going to do that thing, Phil, that some people say. Well, if you didn't like this, you wasn't a fan to begin with. I'm not going to say that. I just think it's an overreaction. Listen, in case anyone needs reminding, I hate to be the guy to break it to you because I grew up with this stuff, just like a lot of you did. None of this is real. Okay? Can we just remember that? That there's no white mermaid swimming down below that can't become African American later. And when she does, it's okay. Want to know why? She's not real. Like, what are we doing? Like, we're so upset. We're so mad. We're so rage filled. We're so, I don't know what more, words to use here. It's okay if things change because, again, they're not real. I don't know how better to say it. You know what I mean? Like some people's man, I'm ranting. Some people's entire identity is tied into the stuff that makes them happy or that they watch or they consume as entertainment. Like maybe turn off the TV and go outside, take a walk, for God's sake. Hit the gym. I don't know. I don't know. Sorry to rant. Uh, let's take this home before I piss anyone off, Phil. Give me your final word on Secret Invasion.
um, Man, very enjoyable show. Almost three three fourths of the way through. And then at some point it was just like, hey, we got to wrap this thing up. And it became very apparent that they were trying to wrap it up as fast as possible in 6 episodes. And I think
Mhm.
that hurt it a lot. I think it hurt it that they tried to do all the formulaic things like the big budget action scenes and the big superhero fights. And I think when this show was just an espionage show that gives us a vulnerable Nick Fury and gives him ties and relationships to people um, other than what we know him to be, it's actually a very good show. I think despite some of the things that I dislike about it, it gave us some of the best acting I've seen in any Marvel property.
Mm.
Um, but unfortunately, you know, it went out on a sour note, and as some people say, people only see the last part of what they're showing you. It doesn't matter all the rest of it. I just see how you finished it, and did not finish this thing well enough for people to see it in a good light, um, which is unfortunate. But what can you do?
Yeah, well said. Well said. I can't really follow it much up with much better than that. I mean, like you said, they only care about the end. It doesn't matter. It's like all they saw is all they take away is the end, which is another reason why you stick the landing. You always come through in the end. And
Hmm.
it's one thing if people aren't happy with the outcome, because again, that's subjective. But when plot points don't resolve, when characters maybe don't speak the way they've spoke the whole series, or things happen that really don't make any sense plot wise, that's when you lose the audience. And
Yeah, it's yeah. How you end it is very important, and I
yeah.
mean, man, we're wrestling fans. Hey, man, we had a good pay per view going. That exploding barbed wire death match was
Mm-hmm.
fun, and then we
Mm-hmm.
got to that dud of an ending, and that's all people talk about. They'll talk about whether the match itself was good. They just talk about the finish.
Hey, look, I'll be honest with you. Without looking, I can't tell you one match on that card except for the last one, and I know it was a good card, but to that point, I can't recall any matches on that card.
Yeah. Yep.
So yeah, yeah, there's something to be said for that. Well, All right, kids, there you go. Secret Invasion. We will definitely cover Armor Wars when it happens. We're definitely going to cover the Marvels when it comes out. So keep your eyes and ears open. We'll be back for that for sure. And yes, this is the 6M podcast. In case you didn't know, Marvel is an M. It's going to remain an M. So say I, so say we all. And that's what we got for you. And that is Secret Invasion.
Hey, thanks for listening to the show. Check out our social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at 6M Podcast. We'll see you next time.